Shabbat Shalom. This is the brother Ra'aya coming at you with another Shabbat lesson. But before I get started, as always, I'm going to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai Bahasham, Rakah HaKodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who ruled and teach well. In peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. Shabbat Shalom. And in this Shabbat lesson, I've got an article and a couple of videos to show that biblical prophecy just continues to take place at a rapid pace right before our very eyes. Apostle Tahar has deemed 2022 to be the year of Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai turning things up, and things have been turning up exponentially. You've got this continuing and looming food shortage and food crisis taking place out here, which is going to lead to these biblical famines spoken of in the scriptures, which is going to take off a lot of people from the face of the earth. With each passing day, we get closer and closer to the rollout and eventual mandatory implementation of the Charagma, the RFID/NFC C-hip implant, which is the MARKOFTHEBEAST in Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 to 18. At the end of this month, Elon Musk is expected to show the first human trial of his Neuralink computer brain interface implant, that right hand or in the foreheads, and World War III, nuclear war, continues to intensify out here. And that's what I'll be going into. All the major players for the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon in that Middle Eastern region, which is going to be the main part of World War III, are getting right into place and fulfilling their roles that Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai has set up for them. And I originally had recorded this video on my laptop because I played a few videos in it, but when I went to play it back, the audio for the clips I played got picked up, but me giving my commentary didn't pick up at all. So, hey, that's just Satan. And what can you do? So I'm gonna play these clips on my laptop right here the best that I can. So just bear with me, Akim. But the first bit of information I'll be going into is an article on RT.com titled "Putin Calls for Closer Ties with Arab States. The Middle East and North Africa play an increasingly important role in a multipolar world," the Russian leader said. In the Middle East, North Africa, as well as Russia, play a very important role in biblical prophecy. Russia is going to be that major nation that's going to be a guard unto these smaller nations like those in the Middle East and North Africa during these conflicts to come, that battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, that third woe, World War III. And even before then, we've been seeing Russia being a guard unto these smaller nations out here who have been getting bullied by these Western nations, especially the United States of America. You saw what happened in Iraq, Syria, and Libya. The U.S. and their Western allies achieved their goals in Iraq and Libya of overthrowing their sovereign leaders so they could set up puppets to grape that nation of its resources and just be ultimately the hidden hand behind the scene in those nations. But look at what happened with Syria. They tried to do the same thing, but who raised up to the occasion to be a guard unto Syria? Russia. And it's no different with these other nations out here that are at odds with the Western powers. Russian President Vladimir Putin has urged for stronger relations with the Arab League and its member states, proposing closer cooperation to maintain regional security and resolve a number of ongoing conflicts from Libya to Yemen. Addressing members of the Arab League ahead of the body's 31st summit in Algiers on Tuesday, Putin said the formation of a multipolar system of international relations is gaining momentum. And when a term like multipolar system or multipolar world order is thrown out there, that means an order set up separately from the domination and hegemony of the Western powers, chiefly the United States of America, which has been the sole superpower since the collapse of the Soviet Union back in the early 90s. And ever since that took place, like I just said, the U.S. has been running roughshod on these smaller nations, fomenting civil wars, protests, and straight out going to war against them to overthrow their leaders and set up puppets so they can pull the strings and get resources and other things they want from those countries. Putin said the formation of a multipolar system of international relations is gaining momentum, adding that the nations of the Middle East and North Africa, with a combined population of almost 500 million, will play an increasingly significant role in this process. Like I just said, Russia, the Middle East, and some countries in North Africa are going to play an increasingly important role in biblical prophecy. But real quick, let's get into these precepts. This is Ezekiel chapter 38. I'm going to start at verse 1. And the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, which is the biblical name for Russia. And besides being known as Gog in Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 2, Russia is also known as the North Country in Jeremiah chapter 50, verse 9, and as the Medes in Isaiah chapter 13, I believe verse 16 or 17. The land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws. And that's speaking of the Most High putting that old confrontational Soviet Union spirit back onto these Russian Edomites, which we can clearly see with their current military operation in Ukraine. They're looking to get these former Soviet Union states back into the Russian Federation, to rebuild that former glory of the Soviet Union, which you've had comments of Vladimir Putin saying as much here and there, as well as the president of Belarus. And we can see that Russia has been building back up its influence in the world, politically and militarily. They helped Bashar al-Assad in the Syrian civil war, in his fight against the U.S. and the state of Israel's proxy mercenary forces that he was fighting, or what people refer to as ISIS. And they've also built up their a military naval port they had in Syria. They built that back up. They're doing political and military ties with countries like Sudan. You see that they're strengthening their relationship with countries like China and Iran. They're even though it seems that Turkey is more against Russia than for them, Russia and Turkey have ties in that Arctic Ocean region. Russia is building up its military assets, nuclear capable there. And like I just said, besides being known as Gog in the scriptures, Russia is known as the North Country in Jeremiah 50, verse 9. And what is north of the United States of America? Canada, that Arctic Ocean region, and then Russia, the North Country. And it's a well-known fact that Russia shooting its missiles from itself across the Arctic Ocean region from the north, as well as from its military assets in that Arctic Ocean region to hit its military targets in the U.S. would be the shortest trajectory time for those missiles to reach its targets in the U.S. And I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company, with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords, their military asset and personnel, jets, helicopters, tanks, artillery pieces, soldiers, the S-300, the S-400, drones, all those assets ultimately being gathered down into that Middle Eastern region, the Valley of Jehoshaphat, for the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And Russia's already got military personnel stationed in Syria. Let me see. Verse 5. Persia, which is the ancient name for Iran, and where's Iran located? In the Middle East. Ethiopia and Libya, where's Libya located in? North Africa, with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer, which is speaking of Turkey, and all his bands, because, like I just said, Turkey seems like they're more against Russia than for Russia, but ultimately they're going to completely ally themselves with Russia during World War III to fight against the West. And all his bands, the house of Togarmah of the North Quarters, and all his bands, and many people with thee, be thou prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, all your allies, such as Persia or Iran in the Middle East, Libya, North Africa, Ethiopia, Gomer or Turkey, and these other Arab and North African nations. And be thou a guard unto them, be a protector unto them, major ally unto them, which is what I've been saying throughout the lesson so far, that Gog or Russia has been the major nation that's come to the aid of these smaller nations that have been getting abused by the Western powers, especially the United States of America. And as we're reading in that article on RT.com, Russia is calling for greater cooperation in a future multipolar world order amongst these Middle Eastern and North African nations. Be thou a guard unto them. Again, Putin said the formation of a multipolar system of international relations is gaining momentum, adding that the nations of the Middle East, such as Iran, North Africa, such as Libya, with a combined population of almost 500 million, will play an increasingly significant role in this process. Russia, Gog, is ready to continue to fully boost ties with the Arab League and all its members, particularly in strengthening regional and global security, the president continued. We believe that the military and political issues that the Middle East and North Africa are facing, including the Syrian and Libyan crises and the Yemeni and Israeli-Palestinian conflicts, should be resolved based on universally recognized international laws with full respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the states. The Arab League summit kicked off later on Tuesday with officials from all the body's 22 members in attendance, besides Syria, which had been suspended from the organization since its civil war began in 2011. Though there was some discussion about allowing Damascus to attend the event in Algiers, Syria's own foreign minister reportedly suggested the issue be resolved later for the sake of Arab unity, given the challenges posed by the current regional and international conditions, according to the Algerian foreign minister Ramtain Lamamra. So with this article, now I'm going to go to my next bit of information, which is a clip from Wyon's YouTube channel. And the title reads, Gravitas, U.S. says Iranian troops were in Crimea helping Russia attack Ukraine. And as we'll see in this clip, Russia and is already getting help from one of its allies one of that company of nations that is going to be assembled unto it during World War III, that battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, that country being Persia or Iran. This clip is going to say that Iran has troops in Ukraine helping Russia with that conflict, and that they're also sending drones and other military equipment to help the Russians in Ukraine. And in turn, for Iran helping Russia, Russia is going to help Iran when the state of Israel eventually foments a war against them. Because just recently, you had Benjamin Netanyahu win the re-election of the prime ministership in Israel. And Benjamin Netanyahu is a well-known hawk against Iran and wanting to do military strikes against Iran, especially their nuclear program, because he states that it's a threat to the existence of the state of Israel. And we know that according to biblical prophecy, the state of Israel is going to do something that's going to draw these bigger nations down into that Middle Eastern region and play into the bigger battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And this is a fair use copyright disclaimer. I do not own any of the footage in this clip, nor do I stand to gain from it monetarily. It is simply for educational purposes. And let me see the best way I want to go about playing this. Push this back a little bit. Yeah, let me see. Yeah, you won't be able to see the visuals, but you'll be able to hear the audio, so that's good enough. And I'm going to play about 5 minutes or so of this clip.
Let's move on now and ask the question which everyone is. Did Iran help Russia in striking Ukraine? Or did Iran not help Russia? For starters, here's what the United States has to say.
We assess that Iranian military personnel were on the ground in Crimea and assisted Russia in these operations. Russia has received dozens of these UAVs so far and will likely continue to receive additional shipments in the future.
Now, like you heard, the US is alleging that not only did Iran help the Russian military in operating Iranian drones, but also that the Iranian military was out on the ground in Crimea, helping the Russians firsthand. This is the latest development in a story that began with Ukraine's allegation that Kiev was struck by Iran-made kamikaze drones. Russia denied, as did Iran. And then reports said that Iran will be selling more drones to Russia, also missiles. But there is a defense deal in place between the two countries, and now you have this. Listen in.
We're concerned that Russia may also seek to acquire advanced conventional weapons from Iran. That includes potentially surface-to-air missiles that will almost certainly be used to support Russia's war against Ukraine.
So there is clearly a new alliance at play here, Iran and Russia. Iran had not voted in favor of Russia in the March 2nd UN resolution, remember that. Only Belarus, North Korea, Syria and Eritrea had. But now Iran seems to be actively helping Russia on ground. There are numerous implications. We have been telling you what this means for Israel, which of course is Iran's arch rival, and may now be forced to pick sides. But let's take a look at another aspect tonight. What does all of this mean for Iran? What does Iran stand to gain by supporting Russia? But before that, we must first look at what's happening in Iran. 1. Iran remains one of the world's heavily sanctioned countries. 2. The West was hoping that Iran returns to the talking table on the nuclear deal. You know, the one it signed with 6 world powers back in 2015. 3.
Which President Trump, during his administration, as well as the state of Israel, did everything they could to derail the Iranian nuclear deal, the JCPOA, because they ultimately don't want peace with Iran. Just go look up that clip from General Wesley Clark, where he said that there was a plan that the U.S. had to overthrow 5 Middle Eastern countries in 7 years, and that included Iraq, Syria, and he said it ended off with Iran because the state of Israel and their lapdog, the U.S., want to make all those nations in the Middle East weak. They want to balkanize them so they can't stand up to Israeli hegemony. And the state of Israel would be the strongest nation in that region and able to call all the shots. Just look up something called the Oded-Yinon plan.
Iran is already in the middle of a turbulence. We have been telling you about the protests, the ongoing protests that have rocked the country, following the death of a young woman, Mahsa Amini, who was arrested by the country's morality police for so-called inappropriate clothing. This is what Iran looks like right now. Just months ago, US officials were saying that there has been some progress on the nuclear deal front. And now, the US says that Iran's nuclear deal does not appear to be in the offing at all.
It's no secret that a deal does not appear imminent. A deal does not appear in the offing, at least not at the moment.
But you see, one can't help but ask, why is Iran becoming an accomplice in Russia's war? What's Iran to get out of this alliance? Because the price surely is a stiff one. You see, the US is already talking about penalizing Iran for helping Russia. So we are looking at possible economic sanctions, even export controls. This Politico article quotes a US official as saying, are we going to do more about Iranian military sales to Russia? Absolutely yes. Because we are absolutely going to sanction anybody who's helping Iranians help Russians kill Ukrainians. I come back to my original question. What's in it for Iran? And should Israel be worried? So we put these questions to Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis. He's a defense expert. Listen in to his analysis.
Well, I think that Iran has a great deal to gain because they've been using a lot of these drones and building them, but they really haven't had a chance to see how they work in combat, certainly not on a large scale. And now that this also elevates their standing in the world because their people are being seen all over the globe of how effective these things are, even with some of the air defense systems that the modern ones that Ukraine is using, they're getting through. And this has raised their stature and certainly is going to potentially open up another stream of revenue for Tehran, but others may want to buy them as well. Israel's in a very, very tough situation because they want to maintain relations with both Ukraine and Russia, and they don't want to put that at risk. Israel benefits from cooperation with Russia really on a large scale, and especially even in the region there in Syria, with Russia controlling a lot of the airspace over Syria, where Israeli aircraft operate sometimes against either the Syrian regime or against Hezbollah rebels in some of those areas, and they need the cooperation with Russia.
And a couple of months ago, Russian S-300s operated by Russian personnel in Syria fired at Israeli fighter jets who were going against targets, Syrian targets, as well as Iranian targets in Syria, showing Russia being a guard unto these smaller nations. And that relationship that Israel has with Russia is going to ultimately fall apart, with Russia completely taking the side of Iran against Israel and these other Western powers.
So I think that's why you've seen them so far staying with just humanitarian aid. And of course, in the relation with the Iranian drones there, that's a concern for them because they don't want to see the Iranian drone program advance and become more effective. But right now, there's really not a lot they can do about that.
Meanwhile, in Russia, President Vladimir Putin was seen inspecting a training ground.
That's it with that clip. Hey, but as we can see, these biblical alliances are forming right on time and being strengthened, with Persia or Iran being that company under Gog or Russia, and Gog or Russia being a guard unto Iran, ultimately during this war that Israel is going to foment against them. and which is going to play into the bigger battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, that war of Armageddon in that Middle Eastern region. But the last clip I'll be playing is on the Canadian Prepper's YouTube channel, and he's been going in a lot lately, bringing out this information dealing with current events, and with the men of the Lord, the prophets of the Most High on the scene, again, chiefly through GMS or Great Millstone, as well as the brothers coming in the spirit of GMS. We're able to watch this information and filter it through the scriptures to show you exactly what times you're living in. The last days, really the last seconds of these last days, and these biblical prophecies which are taking place right before our very eyes. And I'll show an image of it. And the title of it reads, Russia's 24-hour warning, millions evacuating, diesel collapse. And I'm going to start the video at the 25-minute and 50-second mark. And what the Canadian Prepper is going to talk about in the little segment I'm going to play is that Ukraine is calling for its allies to do strikes against Iran, since Iran is sending military personnel and equipment to Russia. And that just goes to show that this war in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, isn't just confined to that area over there in Eastern Europe. Hey, it's really going to be a powder keg that's going to set off a lot of other issues out here that's going to engulf the rest of the planet. And he's also going to go into how since Benjamin Netanyahu has won re-election as Israel's prime minister, he's calling for strikes or some type of operation against Iran to stop their nuclear program. And this is a fair use copyright disclaimer. I do not own any of the footage in this clip, nor do I stand to gain from it monetarily. It is simply for educational purposes.
Search that if you want. Now, we also have a situation developing with the Iranians. So Kiev right now is urging strikes on Iran. Okay, they're urging strikes on Iran. So this is where you're starting to see the war spill over beyond Ukraine. Ukraine is actively encouraging attacks on the Iranians. That's huge. And they're saying this because, of course, the Iranians are supplying weapons to the Russians. They've openly admitted this now, that they've supplied drones to the Russians. They're saying, well, we did it before the war started. Okay, whatever. But regardless, they're going to be sending more advanced missile systems, and Ukraine's not too happy about this. Now, just consider, though, what that means, right? I mean, if we were to replicate that sort of strategy or that logic with the Russians, you know, who has been supplying Ukraine with weapons? Well, it's been every NATO country, including Turkey, who's kind of on the fence with the Russians. So, I mean, by that logic,
remember, Turkey or Gomer is ultimately going to ally themselves with Russia or Gog when everything's said and done.
The Russians be attacking all the NATO countries. Obviously, that would lead to nuclear war, World War III. I think the same is very true with the Iranian situation. Now, to the Ukrainians' benefit, Netanyahu is now back in power in Israel. And he's very hawkish on the Iranian front, and he's basically saying that unless the nuclear deal can be sorted out or revised, and it's kind of a catch-22 because if the Israelis didn't want the nuclear deal in the first place, and they don't want them to not have a nuclear deal. So they're basically saying we're going to attack Iranian nuclear facilities. Are they going to do it by cyber? Are they going to do it by some asymmetrical means? I don't know. They probably will attempt to do that first, attack more nuclear scientists, whatever the case is. The tensions between Israel and Iran are about to intensify. Absent a nuclear deal,
lightsabers are finally a reality, and you can own one.
This new military flashlight is basically a lightsaber.
Israel will attack Iran. And this is from a longtime member of Israel's Likud party. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce this person's name, but this is on mainstream media. You guys can go and look into this. They basically saying that Israel will attack Iran if a nuclear deal is not reached. And of course, the JCPOA deal has been shelved months ago. The United States has outright said it's likely not going to happen. Definitely not anytime soon. So with the Ukrainians encouraging attack on Iran, with the fight intensifying in Syria in that proxy war, and you even have the Americans were posturing within that region with some of their naval forces recently. So things are on edge all over the world, and if there's a war that breaks out in the Middle East, these prices that we're seeing now are going to seem like the good old days. They're going to seem like when things are great. I was watching the movie I Am Legend yesterday with my son.
That's it with that clip. But again, according to biblical prophecy, we know that the state of Israel is going to do something to provoke Iran into a war, which is going to drag a lot of these bigger nations down into that Middle Eastern region and ultimately play into the bigger battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon. But this is Jeremiah chapter 49, verse 20. Therefore, hear the counsel of Yahweh that he hath taken against Edom. And the biblical Edomites are known as these so-called white people today. These Americans, the British, Europeans, the Russians, the South Afrikaners, Australia, New Zealand. And his purposes that he hath purposed against the inhabitants of Teman. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. And the least of the flock is talking about those Israelis who for the rest of the video I'll be referring to as the 1948ers. They aren't the true children of the Most High. They are also Edomites of the tribe of Amalek. And the true children of Israel, they are known as the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today. But as it said, surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Surely he shall make their habitations desolate with them. The 1948ers are going to do something. A false FLAG, a direct attack. Just a while ago, the 1948ers did a military drill called Chariots of Fire, which simulated an attack on Iran and its allies with all branches of the 1948er military, and the U.S. military was involved in it to some extent, where they were doing drills using U.S. military refueling planes, and they were doing drills with 1948er fighter jets to simulate them refueling those jets as they do long-distance strikes on Iran. So, again, the 1948ers are going to do something to provoke a response from Iran, which, as I said, the least of the flock is going to draw them out. It's going to draw these bigger nations down there, the U.S. and these NATO nations in on the side of the 1948ers, and on the side of Iran, Russia, China, and her other allies, which is ultimately going to play into the bigger battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon. But now I'm going to close it out in Joel chapter 3. I'm going to start at verse 9. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, the heathen Gentiles, which is what the men of the Lord, the prophets of the Most High, chiefly through GMS or Great Millstone, as well as the brothers that come in the spirit of GMS are doing by going out onto the highways and byways preaching this word, as well as putting up video epistles online, proclaiming among the heathen Gentiles to prepare for war against Iran, World War III, nuclear war, the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon. Wake up the mighty men. Let all the men of war draw near. Let them come up. You've already got a Russian military presence in Syria. You've got a U.S. military presence in Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Syria. And again, the 1948ers just did that Chariots of Fire military drill, simulating attacks on Iran and its allies. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. All these nations getting into a war footing instead of a footing for peace, because we're not living in the times of peace and safety. We're living in the times of world war, nuclear war. Let the weak say I am strong. And an example of that is Ukraine, a smaller, weaker nation, getting some big nuts, asking its allies to do strikes against Iran, for Iran helping Russia in that Ukrainian military conflict. Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen. The United States of America, the 1948ers, Iran, Russia, Saudi Arabia, China, Turkey, these NATO nations, and gather yourselves together round about. Thither cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Yahweh, and those mighty ones are the death angels of the Most High, holding back this great destruction, waiting to get the go-ahead to release it, which is mainly going to happen after the charagma, that C-hip implant in Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 to 18 is mandatorily implemented. Let the heathen be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, which in the Hebrew is Yahweh's Shabbat, or Yahweh's judgment. And when you go up to the first couple of verses of this chapter, you'll see ultimately why the Most High is gathering these heathens down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, or Yahweh's Shabbat, to judge them for afflicting the apple of his eye, the children of Israel, again known as the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today. And at the top of that list of the heathens that afflicted the children of Israel, as pursuant to Psalms chapter 83, are you Edomites. For there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come get you down, for the press is full. The fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of Yahweh is near in the valley of decision. And with that information we just went through, we can clearly see that the day of Yahweh is very near in the valley of decision. Apostle Tahar deemed 2022 to be the year of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai, turning things up. They've turned up exponentially and will continue to turn up. And it's looking like 2023 is going to be even more exciting. So that's it with this Shabbat lesson. And with this Shabbat lesson, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. As we can clearly see, we're almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babol, Kwam Yasharallah, and until next time, Shabbat Shalom.